The Daysum compound.
A birth at the Daysum. The birth was a heralded event in the Daysum compound. A third birth was an incredibly unusual occurrence for any couple. But this pregnancy was even more special. It had been contracted by the lead genetic coordinator at the request of the elite leadership. All births in the Daysum were scheduled at 7-year intervals, and most genetic alignments supported only a single birth. When genetic matches were shown to indicate strong likelihood for special skill sets, then a second coupling was scheduled. But a third coupling was almost unheard of. It had been more than 23 decades since the last time a third child had entered the Daysum compound, and the entire community was pulsating with anticipation. The previous third birth had brought the Daysum compound their leader, a genius they called Spartacus. At the age of 8, Spartacus had envisioned the building of a new city of the people. He founded the current Daysum system of timeline mapping. It was Spartacus who had predicted that the next third birth would lead to temporal realignment. He stated that this anointed third birth would come from the union of a founding father and a re-entry mother from the central city. So it was that when the genetic alignment of Emile, the descendant of one of the 5 founding fathers, was paired with Helene, a re-entry mother of 2 visionary geniuses, the entire Daysum compound was set for the new arrival of their next leader. The process of creating the next leader was not left to chance. The ideal timing of the birth must align with astrological influences and specified considerations of the existing timeline. But the most important factor was the perfection of the gene code. This was left in the hands of the most recently appointed genetic coordinator, Ferdinand Geller. The role of genetic coordinator was one of the most sought-after positions in the whole compound, and so when Ferdinand Geller was appointed, the whole compound cheered. Besides having incredible talents, Ferdinand, whom everyone called Fern, was a great guy. He was friends with everyone in the compound. He always had a kind word and a cup of some warm liquid for his friends, and everyone was his friend. The things that made him so likable was that he was the same way with everyone, whether you were a top elite or one of the lowliest adepts in training. Fern seemed to care about you like you were a brother. Fern had been appointed for only a year when the assignment of the third birth had been put in his charge. No one doubted that he was the one for the job. It mostly consisted of a laborious process of checking every potential weak point in each of the parent genomes and selecting the strong genome as the preferred crossover point. The prediction of genetic crossovers had long been understood. Fragile breakpoints in chromosomes were easily labeled. Where a possible harmful gene could be expressed, the crossover was switched to ensure the preferred parent would provide the DNA. This was a time-staking, critical task. Thoroughness was the watchword. For more than 3 months working non-stop, Fern searched for the way to eliminate a critical fragile point in Emile's code. He was at the end of his time. The third birth had to take place before spring. He wasn't sure he had succeeded. Nonetheless, he prepared the fertilized ovum for incubation, and the necessary preparations were made for the birth of a new leader. Only at the birthday of the new babe could the full success be determined. That birthday was now. Fern was assigned to the final assessment. He entered the incubation room with mother and child.
This will only take a moment,
Fern said with his usual warm and honest smile.
and then you two can continue the important work of bonding.
Fern stood by the side of the bed. His curly red hair created a wild dome of color against the stark white walls, white mask, and white dust jacket. He pricked the left heel of the newborn with a small needle and collected the blood on the 5 points. Now the future genetic expression of the newborn could be determined. The 5 points of blood were assessed for what would be epigenetically active sites over the period of the first 21 years. This expression by the best estimate algorithmic sequence timeline, affectionately known as the BEAST, was accurate to such precision that it could predict the number of hairs on your head at any day of your life.
Okay, Helene, you should get back to resting.
Fern covered the feet of the child and patted Helene's hand. He felt a pang of guilt as he turned towards the door.
What do you think is the likelihood that he is a non-compatible?
Helene said these words so softly and with a slight tremble in her voice, holding back waves of tears, fighting off terror of what she knew could be a possibility.
Oh, I doubt it is anything you will have to worry about. He looks perfect to me.
Fern smiled nervously and held her hand one last time. This time his exit was swift. He turned on his heels and walked quickly towards the door, carrying the 5 points of blood that would determine the fate of the child. Fern knew that there was a chance that the sequence would be non-compatible, and even if it was slight, it meant the most tragic outcome for the new mother.